Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Criminal Minds Season 1, Episode 19, Machismo. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So in this episode, it starts with some Day of the Dead celebrations, where there is then a family drama fight between an uncle, mother, son, nephew, and brother and sister. And then we see the mother later being killed by the killer of the episode, Pablo. And we then move on to Aaron celebrating his birthday with his son's wife and sister-in-law. And then we see how everything starts fine. However, then work calls and we hear Haley say that his wife is calling. And then when he says he has to go, she pretends to be okay with it, says it's okay, but the emotions she's giving off are not that she is okay with it. And even the sister-in-law kind of like looks at him angry and is like, some profiler you are, when he says she said it was okay. Showing the first hints that maybe something isn't necessarily great with their relationship, despite having like a new baby together. Anyways, he goes in, they're briefed that basically Mexico is calling for their help in order to put the serial killer speculations that the papers are doing to the test, and basically the government wants the serial killer notion to be denied. Meanwhile, the police are open to either possibility. So the team goes to Mexico. They look at the first crime scene. They clear the first suspect and they investigate. And as they're investigating, they find out more details. For example, the suspect they have in custody couldn't have done it because sexual homicide is a reflection of a person's sexuality, so they kill people they find attractive. Therefore, the main suspect being a homosexual means that he would have attacked men, not older women. Therefore, it wasn't him. They then talk to his boyfriend because they think maybe he might have, tried to defend his lover, but he then says wasn't him, but he did see a heavyset woman going to the mother's house before the murder happened, which then leads them to, at the crime scene, they find two glasses, and one of the glasses' DNA is male, and they realize that most likely it's a man who is dressing as a woman, and that is why the older women felt safe letting him into their house, because they thought he was a woman, more specifically a social worker reaching out to provide some help to the elderly. And when the women are killed, it's their daughter's jewelry that's taken, and then we have them realize that he probably started with assaulting women before he moved on to murdering them. And so it goes back to them asking women to come forward. And in the end, they find the stressor because one of the women who he had started with younger women turned around and laughed in his face because he was dressed like a woman, and she called him a coward and a dog and a bunch of other derogatory things. And this, they believe, is the stressor that led to him, instead of continuing to assault younger women, to killing older women. And then they realize that the connection is the maiden names and that he's actually going for the mothers of the women that he had killed. And the last person is, of course, the one who laughed at him's mother. So the team then go to first the factory they believe he worked at, because all of the victims kind of worked or lived around this particular factory. They find Pablo's name, they go to his house, they find his mother's corpse, then they make the connection to the name sort, and then they go and find the last victim. But what they find is Pablo in the grass, dying from bleeding out, And basically, all of the women and the last mother that was there that he had assaulted basically all got together and decided to put an end to it themselves. And then they all go back to the station and they decide not to press any charges against the women because they were just, well, in the Mexican minds, defending themselves. And so they then get off without any charges. Killer is deceased, and the FBI team go back home. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we will now rank the episode. As always, we'll start with the mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. And our mostly objective rank values, we first have our single episode supporting character introduction. And while there were quite a few supporting characters in the episode, most were only very briefly seen. The only one that really stayed start to finish with the episode was Captain Victor Navarro, who was the one that brought them to who convinced the district attorney to reach out to the FBI and invite them there. And he basically guides them through the entire investigation, kind of learning what they're doing as they go. And even at the end of the episode states that he wouldn't mind starting a BAU in Mexico as well to prevent something like what has been happening again. We then have the multi-season supporting character introduction, and this is Jessica Brooks, who is Haley's sister and Aaron's sister-in-law, and she's worth 3 points. Then we have the multi-season main character development, which is the fact that we are celebrating Aaron's birthday at the start of the episode. I don't think they specifically mention what the date is of the birthday, but the fact that his birthday was being celebrated is a development for the character. So 4 points. This episode was memorable. Even before watching it, I remembered it. Most likely because it is unique in the sense that it does take place in a different country, with them being asked to assist with the law enforcement of another country, which is something that doesn't happen often on the show. And additionally, the Day of the Dead element, which is also, again, a point of interest that makes it memorable. The fact that the killer dressed up as a woman, the fact that the victims that survived him turned vigilante. These are all very memorable things, so it did become a memorable episode, which is also worth 4 points. However, there were some negatives, and the first is negative messaging or behavior. The first negative behavior was the prejudice of the Mexican police when they are told that the killer may have a history of sex crimes and like to dress up as a woman. They then go out and basically parade like every cross-dressing person in the entire like city that they can find to the police station, causing a huge incident. They drew a crowd. There was a bunch of people watching it. And it just felt like there was a little bit of prejudice there because they heard dressed as a woman and criminal and immediately assumed that anybody who cross-dressed would automatically be a criminal, and basically took advantage of the FBI's profile to stage this show to basically humiliate these people. So that wasn't great. And then, even though it was forgiven in the show itself, and even I would probably forgive it too, vigilantism, probably not something that should be encouraged. Tempting though it sometimes is to take justice into your own hands, and the fact that none of these women came forward because they didn't feel like the police would be on their side or give them the support or do what needed to be done, the fact that they then turned around and took it into their own hands is again reasonable to a certain extent, or not necessarily reasonable, but understandable. That would be a better word. It is understandable, but at the same time, nothing to encourage, and ultimately, they did become what attacked them by basically doing what the attacker did, which is murder somebody. So I took 2 points for it. And then, last but not least, we took 3 points for the main relationship regression or breakup, and this is regression. At the start of season 1, we met Haley with Aaron, and they were happily married, happily in a relationship. She was on bed rest, and they were having good conversations. They seemed to be in a secure and happy marriage. She seemed to understand his work and the time that it took him away from the household, and presumably while they've been married, it's been the same. But now that the baby's there and maybe there's more stress, maybe there's a changing of priorities for her, she wants Aaron to be there more often. She even comments to her sister that her sister being there has allowed her to convince Aaron to take more time off than he normally would. Um, but then, of course, there's the reference to his work being his wife, and then her very badly acting like it's okay for him to leave his birthday celebration when it's clearly not. And even the sister, the look that she kind of gives him when he's leaving. And, well, let's just say that the marriage is definitely not as secure or happy as it was at the start of season 1. And this is the episode where we first start to see that hint. Obviously, spoilers, but in the future, if because this is a rewatch, I assume people have watched it. Um, they do get divorced. So this is the first kind of hints that we see towards that eventual ending. Um, and again, minus 3 points, which does ultimately leave us with a 5 out of 10 for this episode. And with that, our season 1 mostly objective ranking becomes: in first, Extreme Aggressor, Natural Born Killer, The Tribe, Somebody's Watching, Compulsion, The Popular Kids, The Fox, Derailed, Blood Hungry, What Fresh Hell, LDSK. This episode does come in 12th, Machismo. Then we have Plain Sight, Riding the Lightning, Broken Mirror, Poison. In 17th, A Real Rain, Won't Get Fooled Again, and then in last place, Unfinished Business. Meanwhile, my personal ranking for this episode, as I mentioned, it was memorable. And the reasons I mentioned it being memorable also kind of apply to the score. It was interesting to see how a different culture handles crimes, and particularly serial killers. I like that it was taking place around Day of the Dead, which added an element of interest to the episode. I even liked the concept being pretty unique, the fact that they went to another country, which again is extremely rare on the show, and additionally that they had, um, you know, a killer who doesn't really feel typical in the sense that he did cross-dress, which does happen again in the show. Like there are other episodes where that occurs, but this is kind of the first one where we saw that, where it happened to be elderly women being attacked, which we have seen like middle-aged before, but not necessarily elderly, that it was specifically the mothers of the daughters that he had assaulted in the past, which is kind of messed up, actually very messed up. The vigilante ending, and additionally the vigilantes getting off with no charges or repercussions for their actions of becoming vigilantes. All of these were interesting, and frankly speaking, I did not mind from a personal perspective the fact that these women took it into their own hands and managed to defeat the monster that hurt them and killed their mothers, except the one. And I mean, imagine how devastating that is to learn that the reason that your mother died is because this person assaulted you and then later was humiliated and so decided to go and kill everybody's moms. Like, that's terrible. And I feel like there'd be some level of survivor's guilt in relation to that as well, which also adds like an element of horror to this particular killer that isn't necessarily there with the others, because there's that element as well. And I just felt like also with the family drama that was kind of well, for example, telenovelas, Spanish sitcoms, are really, really known for the drama, and I do like how the episode also kind of starts with that level of drama, with this whole like family situation and drama happening, which ultimately end up being completely unrelated. But I also did enjoy that as well, because that's also feeding into the theme of the episode. Overall, I did like it, but at the same time, I did find sometimes it got a little bit slow. It did kind of feel like there was a level of uncooperation at times by the police. There was that whole because the government wants the serial killer theory put to bed, that there's a certain level of things working against them. And again, I understand the vigilantism and I understand why they would want that, and I did personally enjoy it. But at the same time, I feel like if you are a murderer, if you become that which haunts you, then you're not really better. And so I do think that there should have been some consequences for the action, even if it was just like a slap on the wrist, something to discourage other people from doing the same in the future. Like, I feel like there should have been something. Either way, again, I did enjoy the episode. It was one of the more memorable ones. Most of the elements of it I did enjoy. So I did give it a 7 out of 10 ultimately. And that brings my personal list to In First the Tribe, Somebody's Watching, Derailed, Riding the Lightning, Compulsion. This episode I put in 6th place, Machismo. Then we had Plain Sight, Extreme Aggressor, The Popular Kids, Unfinished Business, Natural Born Killer, A Real Rain, What Fresh Hell, The Fox, Blood Hungry, LDSK. In 17th, Won't Get Fooled Again, followed by Broken Mirror, and in last place so far is Poison. And that now brings us to the series ranking so far. And under our mostly objective ranking, we have season 1 at 106 out of a possible 220, and the personal ranking so far is at 94 out of a possible 220. But with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Criminal Minds season 1, episode 19, Machismo. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.